forehead. So I think that they were making
just because it's on the forehead.
yeah,
Forehead.
they made the connection of the thing on the forehead of the Kohen.
Does anybody else make it? Is like a medrash or a gemara or something, or they were just saying it?
They were just sort of putting it together. Looking here.
What is it? What's it from? Yeah.
Hadar.
Could you forward that to me?
Sure.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, Aaron transfers the sins of the people onto the goat by placing his hands on his head. So there's some sort of something with
the head,
the forehead of Cain and the forehead of the Kohen Gadol, and
but not the word sits.
No, sits.
They went to the head. Okay. Hi, Arona.
Hi, Rabbi.
How are you?
I'm well, and how about yourself?
Very good, Baruch Hashem. It's good
and
to
your father?
Hear your voice. He might be on, or he might be coming on. Who's our call-in user? It says call-in user here.
Survey says.
It's mysterious so far. Anyways, my father is doing incrementally better. He's cradled in love in St. Louis, Missouri with my sister.
Good.
Lots of loving care.
You've got a Gmail and a Yahoo. Is the
Gmail,
they're
both
very
good.
similar.
They're both good.
They both
He
come
doesn't
to you.
read either one.
Yes.
I read them all. The Gmail, there's less people that send things to my Gmail. So maybe send it there, but I do read both of them. I don't necessarily respond always. I say I'm going to respond. I think I'm going to respond. It just doesn't always happen. It's not a conscious decision not to respond. It's a deep subconscious thing, which might be a lot worse.
Imagine if you got 250 emails a day.
Imagine there are people like that.
I'm one of them. It's a nightmare.
And out of those, how many would you actually have to respond to?
I actually have to respond to about 20 or 30.
Seriously,
but
every day.
But I have to read a large chunk of them, and it's because they come from like record companies and stuff like that, and they're saying, there's this new artist with this new album. Would you listen to it and maybe play something? And
right.
I can have a chance, if it says new Norwegian death metal band, I know that I'm not going to be playing it on my show.
There's your mistake. There is your mistake.
But other than that, I feel like, well, what if this is some amazing new artist? And if I don't listen to it,
let's say you are listening to it.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you feel a responsibility to the wider music world to be in some kind of relaxed state so that you can truly hear it?
No. If it's got a sound that this is how it works in this business.
Okay.
You got 15 seconds.
Gotta catch you right
If
away.
something grabs you, if something makes me go, then I'll listen to it all, and then I'll go back and listen to it again to make sure it's something but if in that first 10, 15 seconds, it's just derivative or it's something, then it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a friend who takes writing workshops, and he's always like writing short stories and things. And so he told me like last year he was writing something for one of the workshops, and this was the premise of the workshop, that you have to grab the person in, I think they might have said the first paragraph, but they really were implying the first line. First line. If you want to.
Story night.
And he actually, ironically, like the teacher then collects them all and then tells you which one he liked the best. And he was surprised that that he liked his the best, and then we were looking at it trying to figure out why that would stand out more than any other one. But because that's another thing. What reaches one person, who knows why it stood out at that moment. Now you have a burden. All of mankind is hoping that you are going to call it forward so this guy doesn't lose faith and give up music. All right. I am grateful to be learning with you guys. We have Lois, Arona, and a call-in user who doesn't think of themselves as a call-in user. They just think of themselves as whoever they are. Here we have Hannah and Liz and David and Jason. I was telling, I've told my Daf Yomi class this.
I eavesdropped today, by the way.
You did?
Yeah. I was
So sometimes I tell them that, because I try to introduce everybody, because it's also like hybrid. And so on Zoom, the name is there. But when you're going around the table, obviously you have to remember the name. Now, these are people that I've known for 20 years that are around the table with me. But I can feel that it's getting harder. I get through it.
It gets worse.
Yeah, so but I'm feeling it as that's happening, because I can actually sense that it's getting harder. And I've just said, I'm feeling this may not be much longer where I'm able to do it. But you just see it, it's like disappearing. It's just disappearing. Okay. So in this week's Torah portion, Tetzaveh, got distracted by the tzitz there for a second. So this is not the only time that this is mentioned with regard to the Mishkan, with the construction of the Mishkan. But this is one of them where Hashem tells Moshe, so this is in chapter 28, verse start earlier. Verse 2. So it says, Va'asisa bigdei kodesh la'aron achicha. You will make holy clothing for Aaron your brother, lechavod, for kavod, for honor, ulatiferes, which might be beauty or splendor. And then it says, Va'ata tedaber el kol chachmei leiv, you are to speak with all those who are wise of heart. This is talking about the artisans that are involved in the Mishkan and its vessels. You are to speak to all of them, whom I have filled with a ruach of chachma, a spirit of wisdom. So these are people, chachmei leiv, they have wisdom of the heart. They are filled with a ruach chachma, a spirit of chachma, of wisdom. Va'asu, as bigdei Aaron, and they will actually make the clothing of Aaron. Lekadsho, to sanctify him. Lechahanoli, to be a kohen to me. So these clothing are not being designed in Milan. This clothing is being designed by people who are filled with a spirit of chachma. They are chachmei leiv. So Moshe is charged as the overseer of the project, but they're the ones who are actually going to make it. Now, they're not going to just design it from scratch. They are being told general, first of all, what materials to use, what colors they're going to be, etc. And even some of the design features on some of these are going to be described to them. So you gotta wonder why there's such an emphasis, if the design itself is coming from God. So you got to wonder why it requires people with these characteristics. He's telling them the materials, he's telling them some of the design, what they're used for, etc. So you got to wonder why they have to have these characteristics. Why these are chachmei lev, wise of heart, filled with ruach chachma, with the spirit of chachma, of wisdom. And they're the ones who are designing the clothing. In fact, again, in several different places, it uses this phrase with other aspects of the Mishkan as well. So just thinking about clothing. So we are told that Adam and Chava do not have clothing initially. They only have clothing after they eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which leads us to assume they just wouldn't have had clothing. They wouldn't have had clothing. So I once heard that Ramosha Soloveitchik, that is very much alive and teaching, Ramosha Soloveitchik, who lives in Chicago, I was told that he once said the following: why is it that after the eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that Adam and Chava recognize that they are naked? It says they see that they recognize they are naked. So what is it about eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil that caused them to recognize that? So I believe I had already heard something like this, possibly from the Maharal of Prague. I don't remember. Well, that's why I'm mentioning Ramosha, because I don't remember when somebody told me over that he said it. I had already heard it somewhere from or read it somewhere. So anyway, so he suggested that before they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they recognized themselves as what we'll use the word soul. So they never thought of their body as their person. Their body was obviously a part of who they were, but it wasn't the essence. It wasn't their essence. And therefore, when they saw the world from within the body. The body itself was cover. It was security. They were protected by the body, their essence. But after they ate from the tree, there's a shift in their consciousness, or a shift in their point of perspective. Where do they see the world from? And it shifted to their body. So now they saw themselves as their body. And since their point of perspective is from the body, now they're vulnerable because there's nothing covering it. So the recognition itself represents a shift in their point of perspective. So now they need protection or covering. And so they initially find whatever they can find to cover themselves. Eventually, God, we're told, makes them clothing. He actually makes them clothing, which is leather. Now there's all sorts of mystical stuff about it, but we'll just say that it means some kind of leather clothing. He made them clothing. So when you hear that there's going to be special clothing for the Kohen, it allows you to hearken back to that moment, that shift. So when we think about ourselves, when we think about what we are, we first recall all sorts of external things. And then if we're pushed to, we recognize that those external things, the things that we see, are probably not us. You can ask a few questions and you're led to recognize that they are not us. Like, for instance, if I was writing, if I was a journalist and I just met you and I was writing about you, so I would perhaps talk about how old you are. I would talk about where you live. I would talk about your work, what you do professionally. I might describe your physical appearance. And that would be it. Then if I wanted to go deeper, I might talk about your life, where you came from, what you did in the past, experiences that you had. And at some point, I would recognize that those are not me. Especially, there might be some people who bristle at the choices that a journalist makes when they're talking about them. I could ask questions like, is where I came from, does it define me? A lot of people came from the same place. Is what I do, does it define me professionally? And I might bristle at the fact that somebody thinks that the fact that I do such and such somehow captures my essence. And one after another, I would take all those descriptions, all those attempts to describe me, and I could set them aside. Because I recognize that they don't do the job. They don't really capture me. Somebody might try to capture me by characterizing what drives me, what I long for, what I yearn for, what I praise, or things like that. They are clues, perhaps, but again, I recognize that they are somehow not my essence. But that's the path that somebody would take if they were going that way. Maybe I don't always take it because I don't see myself from the outside, but other people who are seeing me from the outside, that's how they would go. They would look at how I'm dressed. They would look at, like, there are detective shows where they come across a crime scene and they're trying to figure out who this person is. And the first thing they look at is what they're wearing and how they're made up and etc. Because that is how we tend to approach another. We approach other people through that way. But after a while, we recognize that those things are things on the surface. They're not our essence. So when you make, let's say somebody makes a choice about what clothing they wear, I mean, first and foremost, you need clothing for protection. So depending on the weather and etc., you're going to wear clothing. You're going to wear certain clothing. But then it could be argued that for most of us, we're choosing the clothing that signals something about us. Now, it may not actually capture our essence. It's capturing what it is I want to signal to other people, the message I want to send. I may not always be aware that that's what's going on, but I think somebody could make the argument that that's what's coming on. My choice of clothing has something to do with it. Maybe there's some people who like clothing for themselves because they like the feel of the texture of it or the feel of it, or they think they look good in certain colors. But even that decision, I look good in this color, I look good in that color, I'm really referencing what other people think about it when I'm doing it. So again, there is communication. My choice of clothing is communication. I'm communicating with others. So the assumption of the commentaries when they're looking at these clothing is that there is something being communicated. There's some message. So they're looking at the colors, they're looking at the texture, they're looking at the origin of the materials. Does it come from a sheep? Does it come from the ground? Does it gold? What is gold? Is gold because it's precious, because it's rare, or is gold because it shines in the light and calls a connection to the sun? You know, what is silver? And things like that. What's happening and what's the deep lesson? What's the code? There's an assumption there must be some code, especially because the general blueprint is coming from God and then going through these people who are wise of heart and full of spirit. There's an assumption that these choices are very deep, and there's a very deep message in this clothing. It even says that the goal is likavod, for honor, or and tiferet, which is again either beauty or splendor. Sometimes it can mean harmony. I have a friend who is in the early stages of some form of dementia. And we were talking, and his friend said to me that he's preparing for the dementia. And he wants the rest of his years to be meaningful, even as he's no longer able to do what he was noted for, what he took pride in. And he has to now shift away from that. So how does he make the rest of his life meaningful? And he characterized it as, he said, I want to be able to continue to develop my connection with God. That's why he was talking to me in particular, because I'm his religious friend. So he wants to, in particular, continue to develop his relationship with God. But how can he do that when he's entering a stage where where what he reads is not going to make as much sense to him, and he's going to forget all the work that he did up until now? And so how will he build on that? How will he continue in that area? This is the deepest question, the deepest of questions. And it was very deep in the moment. It was a real question. It was a real question. And so when you're communicating with somebody who is in the deepest place and they're asking the deepest question, you also go to that place because they're sort of taking you there. So I suggested, being in that place with him, that his relationship with God, his connection to God, Dveikus, or knowing God, or however we characterize it, his connection with God happens at the place of his essence. However we're going to call that essence. It happens at the place of his essence. And his essence already knows how to make that connection. His essence yearns for that connection. It doesn't need to be taught how to make the connection. It already knows how to make the connection. But what happens is, as we grow in life, we clothe ourselves. We clothe ourselves with layers and layers and layers of things. And those layers and layers and layers of things cover up our essence. And they make it more and more difficult for it to do what it wants to do. It has to break through all these layers. we get to a point where if you ask a 20-year-old person, who are you? They are befuddled by the question. And as I had mentioned to you when I was teaching that class at Scharfman's, and we went through this discussion of who are you? They had to write that paragraph about who they are. And then I asked them, about each description, and they agreed after like a question or two that it's not really who they are. So I came back the next week and they said I had proved that they don't exist, because we grow and add layer upon layer, and we think those layers are us. We're like Adam and Chava. After you eat from the tree of knowledge, you start to believe your point of perspective is from those places. So you could end up having gone to Harvard, and when you're 70 and somebody has a conversation with you, met you for the first time, they will find out you went to Harvard. I mean, that has nothing to do with anything in the moment, because that's become me. I'm the guy who went to Harvard. And my profession becomes me. I'm a doctor. Especially if I end up living in a place that's a desired kind of location. I'm from Highland Park. I'm not saying anybody here is, just saying theory. I'm from Highland Park or something. And these become, I start to identify these with who I am. They're layer upon layer upon layer. And then if you take any of those away, I start to believe that I'm disappearing, and that I am let's say you're a poet and you're having a moment. You're somewhere and you're just having a moment. And so now, because you're a poet, you want to turn that into words. So if you're an honest poet, which many are, you will acknowledge that when you finally wrote down the words are insufficient. They can't contain the moment that you just had. The best you could do is not try to contain it, but to point at it. And maybe help other people stand where you're standing so that they could see it. That is the closest you're going to be able to come. But otherwise, if you actually try to put that experience into those words, it's like you're stuffing something into a box that doesn't fit. And you recognize how limited words are. Words are finite, and you're trying to pack in something that's infinite. But many of us believe if we lose our words, we will disappear. If you lose a loved one or a friend, maybe both the same thing, that you've known since you were a child, it's not uncharacteristic of somebody, it's not uncommon for somebody to say, in some ways, I feel like a part of me is gone, because that person, we had so many shared memories. They knew so many things about me that it was just us that knew it. And now they're gone. There's nobody to talk to about it. There's nobody who remembers it but me. And so I also have a feeling like when those memories are gone, that I'm disappearing. They're all layers. They are not my essence. They are just layers. You know, there's a belief that is prevalent, especially in mystical Judaism, but it creeps up in every, at least what we would call Orthodox expression of Judaism. There is a belief in reincarnation, that after we die, our soul enters a new body and has a new life. It will do that in the future. It's done that in the past. That is a prevalent belief. It is not taught. But almost everyone, every group has stories with reincarnation in it. Yeah, Rizal talks about it. There's an entire volume, that white set up there, called Sefer Shar HaGilgulim, the Gate of Reincarnation. In Hasidic, it fills Hasidic commentary, and scholarship. It exists within Lithuanian scholarship, Sephardic. In the Sephardic world, they talk about it. A person could have an entirely different life, and it's still the same essence. Different parents, different brothers and sisters, different life experience, and it's still the essence. Our essence existed before we were born. Our essence exists after we die. Nothing can take away our essence. Even if somebody starts to lose their memory and starts to lose their words, that has nothing to do with my essence. It's all just layers. It's all just clothing. It's all just opportunities to lose sight and to start to live in that place. But it's not where I really am. It's just an illusion. It's something that happened after we ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's a cover-up. So when my essence wants to make contact with God, it has to go through all these layers. And it does that because I somehow became lost into thinking that those layers are me. And so I'm well-meaning, perhaps, but I've actually gotten in the way of that communication and connection. And when those layers are removed, it becomes easier and easier and easier for my essence to make contact. It doesn't need to be taught how to make contact. It already knows. It comes from there. E.T. phone home. It comes from there. It's just looking to make contact, but it comes from there. And if you allow it to make contact, it knows how to make contact. It knows it. It doesn't need help. The only reason we need help is because we're doing it not from the place of our essence anymore. We're so far away from allowing our essence to be that we need tricks to do it from far away. So we read books about how to do it from far away, and we get tricks on how to do it. I remember there was a guy who was offering a course when I was living in Neve Yaakov, in the neighborhood of Neve Yaakov. So I don't know. It was in the late 80s or early 90s. I was told about a guy who's offering this course for people who counsel other people, who are in a position to counsel other people. So the guy who taught the course, he says, I can help you get to learn a lot about somebody the first time you meet them. If it's a scheduled visit, let's say it's a scheduled visit, and you're going to meet them for the first time. So let's say this person is coming to you for advice or for counseling, whatever. So what you do is, before they meet with you, you ask them to write down, you might have said 6 of the earliest memories you can think of, 6 of your earliest memories, and then describe, the memory. Just write down what the memory is, and then they present that to you, and you read it, and there's all sorts of things you can learn from there. If families in all those memories, that means something. Do they have what you would call an external locus of control or an internal locus of control? Do they believe that outside events determine their life, or do they believe that their actions and their will determine their life? There's all sorts of things you can figure out from doing it. It felt like a magic trick when he was telling it to us. And then, he describes the whole thing, and then he asks you to go out and try it. And it just felt cool. It felt like a magic trick. So I have this friend, a neighbor, who's Yaakov. His name was Dr. Buchbinder, who was a therapist. So I couldn't wait to share this with them, like after I'd taken a few of the classes. And so I'm sharing it with him, and he's like listening. And then he goes, here's what I do. When the person comes in, I pay attention to them. And I really listen. And if you do that, you're going to get all the different things over there. And he said, what you learned is essentially how to find out about somebody without paying attention to them. It's all right there in front of you, ready to be shared with you. But somehow you had to come up with some kind of magical device to get all that information. And it's sort of like that. We're spending all our time going from one mystic to another, reading some deep book or another, looking for some answer or another to our deepest yearning. They amount to that class. A magical way to do that without ever actually doing it. This connection that I'm looking for has been available. It's like Dorothy with her red slippers. I've been wearing the slippers the whole time. But somebody has to tell me at the end that it's always been there. My essence doesn't need to be taught how to communicate with God, how to find God, how to have a relationship with God. It's born of God. It was designed by God, and he designed it in his image. It knows whatever it needs to know. It already knows it, how to make the communication. It knows how to do it. Everything else we continue that we're learning, that we're piling on, looking for the answers to our secrets, is that. It's because I've got so much stuff in the way. Now I need some other device. I need to go to somebody else to tell me about myself. That's how many layers I have that have to go. So imagine that there's a point where God says, I'm going to start peeling away the layers. I'm going to start peeling away the layers. Now, and as he peels away the layers, there's less and less and less in the way until he's peeled away all the layers. And now there's nothing in between. I think if I lose my words, I've lost myself. Certainly my friends will think that. My family will think that. If my family see me losing my words, they're going to think that's what's happening. But I know that's not what's happening, because my words are just these finite boxes I've been trying to put things in. They aren't the thing itself. They're never the thing itself. They're just boxes, boxes and boxes and boxes of things I've been trying to put in. When my words go, all that went was these finite boxes. My essence is never going to go. There's nothing physical that can take away my essence. No disease, no effect of aging that can take away my essence. In fact, weirdly, what it takes away is all the things that have been getting in the way. As it gets removed, as the layers and layers and layers get removed, there's less and less and less. Covering that essence. I've mentioned a few times, there's this figure, he's called Ramana Maharshi. He was this Indian sage who I think died in the 1950s. So there are people who visited him. Somerset Maugham was one of them. There were several people who visited, besides, lots of people that we don't know, but there are people that tried to communicate what it was like to be near him. So something happened to him. He himself said this, something happened to him. There was a transformation, and he went to this place. It wasn't because he studied and prepared to go to this place. It just sort of happened to him as a teenager. And he was in this place. And in this place, he's in this place. In other words, his point of perspective's in this place. And for some reason, he doesn't have any of the layers. And so he's just sort of sits with it. And when other people are sitting with him, they sense that they're in contact with somebody who just doesn't have any of the layers. And when you look in his eyes, you see that place of somebody who doesn't have any of these layers. And he, like, people would ask him questions and he would say, I can answer your question. But the truth is, if we just sit quietly, you'll learn much more. But of course, we can't sit quietly. So we ask questions, and then we write them down, and then we publish books about it, and then we talk about it. And there's probably 10,000 videos about him when all he was trying to say is, because we're so involved in the layers that we can't, even though we feel it, we do feel it. If you're around a profound person, Rabbi Michal Tursky, may he live long and in good health. So he's aging. Somebody was commenting to me that, about his aging and how he's worried that he won't always be here. So I happen to mention that a student of mine in Israel went to see Rabbi Tursky. Rabbi Tursky was in Israel last week. So I saw pictures and videos of what, Rabbi Tursky sitting at the table. I don't know what's going on in Rabbi Tursky's mind while he's sitting there at the table, but this guy walks up to him and has a couple minutes. I think he said 6 or 7. I don't remember how many minutes. There wasn't 6 or 7. He had shorter than that. He had a couple minutes with Rabbi Tursky, and it's the most profound experience he's ever had in his life. That's how he'll talk. That's how he's talking about it. Right, just that moment. Now and So I was commenting to this person who was telling me about Rebbe Tversky aging, that one of the effects is as these layers are being removed, when you're with him, it's just the potency is just it's just so much, it's so potent. Somebody who's looking for clever wit, he still has wit, but I'm saying, but is not as quick perhaps as it was, or somebody's looking for the energy that you remember from when he was young, or somebody's looking for him to stand up straight because he's bent over, and whatever it is that you're looking for, you think he's disappearing. He's not disappearing. More stuff's getting shed and more stuff's getting shed. And now when you're in you're in his presence, if you let yourself just be in his presence, it's more and more potent. And so is it with us. Why is it then, as we're aging, we're starting to lose that stuff? We feel like we're disappearing. It's not us that's disappearing. It's a gift. As this stuff is removed, the essence is being revealed. What many people think of as a kind of empty shell walking, if we would allow ourselves, we would recognize as the most vivid and bright expression of the person we've ever experienced. But we're so busy looking for them in their memory, or in their words, or in their clothing, or in their vibrancy, or in their whatever. We're so busy looking for them over there, we can't see them right in front of our face. As my friend said, I just pay attention to them and I listen. And I find out everything that you were, that in the, yes, there is a message in the clothing. There's only a message in the clothing because we insist on looking at clothing. We insisted on looking at clothing, so now there's going to be a message in the clothing. This goes back to that thing from Rabbi Cardozo from last week, where if it hadn't been for the Chet HaEgel, if it hadn't been for the golden calf, we're told, according to many commentaries, there wouldn't have had to be a Mishkan. The only reason there's a Mishkan is because, as a reaction to the golden calf. So he was suggesting it's because we insisted that we need to see something. We need to see something material. We insisted we need to find God in the material. So now God has to express himself in the material. Okay. Everybody's going to have clothing. All right. You're going to be able to find God in the clothing, just like I found out information from those people's memories. You don't need to be doing that. But if you insist on doing that, because what would happen if he doesn't do it? We're going to keep on looking for him, and he's going to be right there in front of us, but we're not going to see it because we've decided that essence exists in the material. So we're only looking in the material for essence. Do you know where wisdom is? In a book. So you have to read it in a book. So therefore, wisdom had to go in a book. Do you know what it takes for wisdom to go in a book? The infinite has to be packed into the finite in order to do it. The infinite doesn't need to be in words, but we insist that it's in words. We've talked about this. I've talked about this with you over and over until you're sick of hearing it, but I'll say it again. Why do we get together? Why do we get together? It's not because of any particular idea. It's not because I have an idea that I'm sharing with you, because I don't even know what I'm saying, and you're not even listening half the time. It's not what it is. Something's happening. Something very deep is happening that is very important to all of us. But it's not happening in the words. It's not happening. It's not in the words. It's happening from our essence. It's interacting and communicating. Somehow the words matter to us. Why do the words matter to us? Because we insist that words matter to us. So therefore words matter. Did it have to be though? It could be that we could sit in silence and get it. We just don't know how. But it could be we could just sit in silence and it would probably be even deeper, way deeper. but we don't know how to do it. So we insist on there being words. And since we insist on being words, it should be these kind of words, this kind of thing. But that's not where it is. As we're losing our words, as we're losing our memory, as we're losing, we're all those layers are getting peeled away. But our essence is not going to get peeled away. Our essence is going to be the last thing standing. When everything else is peeled away, it's going to be the last thing standing. There will be, all of that will turn to dust, but our essence will still be there. And our essence knows what to do. Our essence doesn't need to be trained. Our essence doesn't need to be instructed. It knows what to do. And especially when it comes to a relationship with God, that it knows well. It doesn't need to be taught how to do it. It knows how to do it. And that is that. I say we do this again
Okay.
next week.
So,
I'm glad you said that in words. Okay.
We understand the irony.
Yes.
We're locked
You
into
didn't even
it.
have to say it. We're going to
Foolish
be there next
irony.
week. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much. Thank
All
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.